Now, the aperture. Like we said, the aperture is a hole or opening through which light travels at its simplest form. There's some technical stuff about its, its blades and they open up and out, but simplest form is an opening in the lens that opens up or closes down to control how much light it comes into the camera and reaches the sensor. I like to compare the components of the exposure triangle to the eye. And we said that the aperture works like the pupil. It gets bigger and it gets smaller to let the light in and out. And then it controls the amount of light being let in, which is the technical function. And then the aesthetic function is that it controls the depth of field. What is the depth of field? The depth of field is how much in front or behind your subject that's in focus. That's the depth of field. When you think about, the easiest way to think about it, when you think about depth of field, just think about them blurry backgrounds. That's what everybody, when people say, can you shoot with depth of field? They asking you really, can you make the black background blurry for me? Because the depth of field is how much in front of the subject and how much behind the subject is in focus. So on your camera, the sensor is flat. It's a flat sensor. Like if you got a DSLR, there's always a little mark on your DSLR. It look like a circle with a line through it. That's telling you where your camera sensor is inside this camera body, right? It's flat. So when your camera focuses, it focuses flat, like a sheet of paper. Just imagine if my hand is like the focus plane. When you focus, the camera shoots out this imaginary plane and it goes straight out because it's flat. And when it hits something, it locks focus there. And the way it works is it's focusing from the bottom to the top, from the side to the side, all on that one plane. That's why sometimes when you take a picture and people are standing behind each other, the person in the front might be in focus and the person in the back is blurry because the depth of field that you're shooting with is too shallow to encompass both of those people. And the way it works is the further it gets away from the focus plane, the more blurry it gets. On both sides, in the front and in the back. So if it comes and it hits me and it's focused here, now the focus plane is going to my feet, to the ceiling, and out to the sides, straight out to the sides. So anything that's not in line with me is gonna start getting more and more blurry the further away it gets. If it gets farther back, if it gets farther, it's gonna get more and more blurry. That's how the focus plane works. And the aperture controls the depth of field by opening up or closing down. How much gonna be in focus, how much not gonna be in focus. And again, it's part of the lens, not the camera body. So it don't matter what camera body you got, how shallow or how deep of focus you can get is all dependent on the lens that you put on here. This lens right here is everybody brought their lenses today. If you look on your lens, you will see like some numbers. It'll say most lenses have it on there, either on the front or on the side. Like this one here is on the front. It'll say, mine says 24 millimeter, then it's gonna be a number with a colon with either one number or two numbers. Like mine says 1:2.8. And then if you look at it and if it says 1:3.5-5.6 or something like that, that's a variable aperture lens. And what a variable aperture lens is, like if it was, most primes, like a prime is only gonna have one number because the primes are like continuous apertures. They don't change. And variable apertures, what that means is the lower number, like the 3.5, you can only get that 3.5 if you zoom the lens all the way out as wide as it can zoom. And then that 5.6 is saying as you zoom in, it's gonna change up until it hits 5.6. And then you're gonna get 5.6 on the all the way zoomed in side. Now, if you got a variable aperture lens, if you set it at like whatever that big number is, it won't change when you zoom in and out. But if you set it at that low number, as you zoom out, it's gonna continue to change until it hits that other number. And that means you're gonna be losing light. That's why the continuous aperture lenses cost a little bit more, because it don't lose light as you zoom. And then this is a prime. With primes, you have to zoom with your feet, so you're not gonna be zooming, so the aperture is continuous on them. Before we move on, any questions on that? Everybody good on that? Okay. Like we said before, it's part of the exposure triangle, and it's measured in stops of light. And it's shown as a fraction. It's actually a fraction. And it's shown as a fraction. A lot of times you just may see like the 4.0 or the 5.6, but it's actually a fraction, which is f2.8, f4, f5.6, and it works just like the shutter speed, just like the ISO, when you double it or cut it in half. And matter of fact, while I'm here, I wanted to address this last time, but it slipped my mind. You know how in the shutter speed, when you double it, the number actually doubles. It goes from 500 to 1,000. The aperture don't look like that because you're actually doubling the size. You're actually doubling your setting, but you're doubling the size of the hole. And because it's a part of the lens, and it's a weird formula that it's like the focal length and something with pi. Anytime I start seeing stuff that say something with pi, it's too complicated for me. So I just don't worry about it. It is a fraction. So that's why the numbers don't act, when you double it, the numbers don't actually double on this, because you're doubling the size of the hole. But on the shutter speed, you can see it double. You go from 500 to 1,000, it doubled, and vice versa. Going back, it cut it in half, right? So the aperture, f-stops. Okay, the wider the aperture, the more light that comes in. It's gonna let more light in, but it also decreases your depth of field. It makes you, that's why when you start to shoot with in low light conditions and the camera start dropping down the aperture, it's harder to get more stuff in focus, because the wider the aperture open up is closing down the depth of field. And the way the depth of field work is, just imagine like I'm the camera and this is my depth of field, and as I close down my aperture, meaning going up to like f8, f16, my depth of field starts getting wider. As I open it up, coming down to like f2, f1.8, it start getting more and more thin. It's like it's a really shallow depth of field, so less stuff gonna be in focus. That's why a lot of times it's hard to get, you can't shoot like big groups at like f2.8 unless everybody's standing in line. If you want them to be behind each other, you have to, close that aperture down. Narrow openings let in less light. Like I say, the narrow openings coming back to like the f8, f16, they let in less light, but it gives you a deeper depth of field, meaning more stuff gonna be in focus, right? And I got some pictures to show y'all this when we go through it. And then the length, matter of fact, before we get into that, let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, talking about the depth of field. Okay. Preview. Okay. See this here? This was shot at f16, and I was focused on the cinnamon candle in the middle right there. You see how you can read what's on the label in the front. You can kind of read the label in the back, and then the fence in the background. You see how it's starting to get blurry. The back of the chair, it still look like it's kind of it's in focus. You can see, you can make everything out in there. Now, that's shot at f16, right? Now, there it is. This is shot at f1.8, and I'm focused in the same spot, but you see now, you can't even read what's on. It's a candle in the front, but you can't read the words anymore. You can't read the words on there, and then you can barely make out that that's a fence back there. Like if I was to look at that and you didn't tell me that was a fence, I'd probably think it was some sticks or something stuck in the ground. Because the further you get away from where you're focusing, the more and more blurry it's gonna get. The same thing coming back toward the camera. The further you get away from where you're focusing, the more and more blurry it's gonna get. So you see like a 1.8 is really blurry as compared to, matter of fact, if I zoom this in, can I zoom this in? Yeah. If I zoom this in a little bit, and you see how from the how the chair is in focus and going up the side of the glass, like that's what, see how the shine, you can see the shine, like going up the glass down to the chair, because the focus plane is going straight up and down and straight side to side. Like everything on that same plane is going to be in focus. And then this one here is deep. You really can't even tell where the focus plane is because it's so deep. All right? And that's the depth of field. Now, lens focal length compression. Who know what lens compression is? T-shirt time. Do anybody just take a stab at it? Who know what lens compression is? Nobody? That was good T-shirt time. Okay. Lens compression is, do anybody got a lens that trombone? When you turn it, the lens slides out as you turn it. Do anybody got one? You got one? Does it trombone when you turn it? Okay, yeah, like that. You see how those lenses, see how they trombone it like that? This is the easiest way you got one too. This is the easiest way for me to think about what lens compression is doing. Imagine, like when you twist it, imagine that the lens is smushing your subject against the back. That's what lens compression, in my mind, like when you twist your lens, it's coming out and it's smushing them against the wall, or it's smushing them against whatever behind them. That's the easiest way in my mind to think about what lens compression is. It's a whole lot more complicated than that, but that's how I get it. It's like you in a big room, right? And you take a picture with a wide angle lens, it looked like a big room. But if you take a picture with lens, where the lens is like going in and compressing, it starts to make the background look like it's closer because it's smushing that person against the back. Y'all understand that? And it also affects, it affects the aperture, how it affects how the aperture, let me read what I got. It will decrease or increase the aperture's effect on the depth of field, meaning the less compressed it is, even if you shoot with a lower aperture, it's going to look like more stuff is in focus. And the more compressed it is, the lower the aperture it is, the more it's going to look blurry. It's going to look really blurry. And I got pictures for this too, because I know it sounds good when you say it, but Tim, I need to see it. Okay, so aperture compression. We're going to come here, preview. Like to thank my handsome son Timothy for being my model. And here we go. We're shooting at f2.8. This is in the back of our backyard. He's probably about a good 40, maybe 50 feet away from that fence line right there, right? And I'm shooting at f2.8, which is as wide as that lens that I got can go. And you can see he's a good little distance away from that fence. In the background, you can see it's starting to get a little blurry back there by the trees, but you can still make out what's behind him, even though you're at 2.8. And 2.8 is really narrow. Now, he's standing in the exact same spot, but this is at 160 millimeters. So it's zoomed in and it's smushing him against, see how it looked like he's closer to that fence, but he's in the exact same spot. He didn't move. The lens compression just like it smushed him against the back, made it look like he's closer to it. That's what focal length compression is. And if you look, it's still shooting at f2.8, but it look a lot more blurry. The background looks a lot more blurry in that picture than in that picture. It's like you can actually, you can make out the sticks on the trees even though they're out of focus, but on this one here, see how it don't look like he's standing in the same spot. That's lens compression and how it affects the aperture, the depth of field. Go back in here, where we at? Any questions on the aperture, the focal length compression, the depth of field, how it works? Everybody tracking on that? Man, I can't be doing this good. I gotta have a question. I gotta have a question. Okay, there you go.
And it's just really, it's not right
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's no right or wrong. All of this, we're artists. It's an artistic form. So if you want your black background blurry, shoot with a shot. You know you're gonna have to shoot with a f2, a f2.8. You can still get a blurry background even with kit lenses, like at 3.5. But that's when you going into that subject distance. We're gonna move into that right now. The subject to background distance. That's when you move into that, because you can, like I say, the further you get away, the more blurry the background is going to look. The closer you are, the more in focus it's going to be. So background distance also affects how it look, because when you look at the back, let's look at the background distance. I'm gonna take these. I'm gonna take this one also. If I can get it, I need my mouse. There you go. Okay. Let's look at this. Now this is all the way up on my porch, right? And we shooting at 2.8. Now, if you notice, like in this picture, the trees, that's at 2.8. And he's closer to the trees at 2.8, and the trees are more in focus, but both of them are 2.8. You see, the trees are less in focus because it's further away. So if you can't really open it up that much, as far as like getting, if you can only get down to like f4 or f3.5, if you have the freedom, move your subject further away from the background or turn them to something that's not as close to them, and you can still get the background to blur a little bit even though you're farther away, because here the trees are more in focus, and then now that he's farther away, the trees are less in focus. And it also looks more in focus because why? I'm at 24 millimeters, so it's like a wider, it's like a wider focal plane. It's less compression. I mean, it's a wider focal length and it's less compression, so more is going to look in focus. Whereas when he's in that same spot at 155 millimeters, he's standing in the same exact spot. But now you really can't even make out that those are trees behind him at all. Like you can see, you know, if I tell you, yeah, that's a tree, but you can't tell me where the fence is because he's farther away. It's like the distance, he's farther away. So now it's like indistinguishable. You don't even really know what it is. And that's how you can get rid of distractions in the background. Like if you're shooting video or if you're taking pictures and you got something in the background that you really don't want to be noticed or be a distraction, you shoot at a more shallow depth of field and it'll help you blurt it out, and it gives it more of a, this is what people like to see when they taking pictures. They like that blurry background. And that's all controlled by the aperture, and it's called the depth of field. How much is in focus and how much in front and behind the subject is in focus.
Tim, just a question.
Mm-hmm.
On that photo, are you switching lenses when it goes from 24 millimeters to 160 millimeters, or is that just switching lenses? Is that a lens switch, or is that
No, it's the same lens. Oh, no. I did, because one is 24. I switched lens,
okay.
And then I put on my 70 to 200. But if you have a lens that can go that far, it'll have the same effect. And then I want it to be exaggerated. That's why I put on a longer lens to make it like more exaggerated.
Mine is a 50 millimeter, and that's why I was asking, was that a different lens?
Oh yeah, if you had a 50 millimeter, it like I shot, which one was it? The candles, where my candles at? I shot this one here with a 50 millimeter. Okay. This one, I shot that with a 50 millimeter at 1.8. Yeah, and that's at 16 with the same 50 millimeter. So it's all about the aperture, how much you gonna get in focus.
So the aperture is driving
how much, the depth of field. Yes, how much is in focus in front of and behind.
That's the prime lens, 50 millimeter prime?
Yes, that's a 50 millimeter prime. And you can do the same thing with a zoom. If you like got a 24 to 70, what is that? A 24 to 70?
17 to 50.
17 to 50, okay, yeah, it'll do the same thing as far as, is it continuous aperture?
I can't say that for sure.
Do it, what does it say? Does it have a 1 colon and then one number?
2.8.
So it's a continuous 2.8. That's a good lens. that's a good lens.
1750.
Oh yeah. Sigma, I had one of those. My first continuous focus lens was a Sigma. That's a good lens. But yeah, you can do the same thing with that. The only reason why I use the prime is because sometimes when I'm taking the pictures, I'll like kind of twist it. Like if you noticed on the one where it was like one time I shot it at 160 millimeters and the next time was at 155, because I kind of twisted it a little bit and I wanted the distance to be continuous. That's why I put the prime on there. Because if you move it, it's gonna adjust. Now, any other questions on the aperture and the depth of field before we move on to the shutter speed? We good? We're good. Anybody need to take a break? Okay, we're good.